She didn't go back for him. She went back because the numbers had finally stopped lying. 7 months of silence, 7 months of hiding in a one-bedroom flat in the Strathcona neighborhood of Vancouver's East Side, eating canned soup, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, watching her stomach grow round and terrifying and real. And then 3 weeks ago, the last piece had clicked into place. The audit trail she'd been working through for months, cross-referencing the Syndicate's shell companies against the Port Authority records she'd photographed before she left. She'd found it. Proof, clear and damning and finally complete, that she had never been the target. Kroll had been. Which meant she'd spent 7 months running from a man who had never sent anyone after her. The Uber driver didn't say a word when she gave the address on Chartwell Drive. He glanced in the rear view mirror once, took in the enormous swell of her stomach, and then very carefully kept his eyes on the road as they climbed through the British properties toward the North Shore Hills. The houses up here didn't have numbers you could read from the street. They had stone walls and camera arrays and men at the gate who carried their hands loose at their sides. Arden paid the fare and stepped out into the sideways rain. She wore a burgundy wool coat that had given up pretending to close around her waist sometime in September. Beneath it, a grey maternity dress she'd found at a consignment shop on Commercial Drive. No jewellery. Her earrings had gone to pay for the external hard drive she'd used to compile the audit files. The small diamond pendant Sayre had given her 2 winters ago was sitting in a safety deposit box in a credit union branch on Hastings Street. The one asset she hadn't been able to bring herself to sell. The iron gate was flanked by stone pillars dense with surveillance equipment. A guard she didn't recognize stepped out of the booth when he saw her. 20s, broad through the shoulders, hand resting somewhere near the lapel of his jacket before his brain registered what he was looking at. A very pregnant woman in the November rain. His posture shifted, just slightly. "Private property," he said. "Can I help you?" "Tell Sayre that Arden Leith is at the gate." She kept her voice level. "He'll want to know." The guard looked at her for a long moment. Then he pressed 2 fingers to his earpiece and turned away. She waited. Rain dripped off the end of her nose. The baby shifted low in her pelvis, a slow, rolling movement that had become familiar in the last few weeks, a full-body reminder of exactly what was at stake. 7 months ago she'd discovered she was pregnant, 4 days after she'd discovered that someone had issued a kill order using Sayre's encryption codes. She had done the math quickly and badly, drawn the only conclusion that seemed to fit, and she had run. She had been wrong about one thing. She intended to make it right. The gate swung open. Felix was waiting at the top of the curved driveway. He was Sayre's right hand, a compact, quiet man from Montreal who communicated primarily through eyebrows and silence, and who Arden had once trusted more than almost anyone on the payroll. He stood under the portico with an umbrella he had clearly grabbed in a hurry, one side slightly inverted from the wind. When he saw her, the umbrella tilted sideways. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Arden," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Hello, Felix." She hauled herself up the front steps. Her lower back had been screaming since she got out of the Uber, a low, grinding ache that had become her constant companion. "Close your mouth. You'll let the rain in." Felix did not close his mouth. He stared at her stomach with the fixed, horrified expression of a man watching a traffic accident unfold in slow motion. "That's your. When did you?" 7 months ago, give or take. She reached the top step and stopped to catch her breath. "Is he in his office?" "He's in the study," Felix managed. "He's going to." "I know." She moved past him toward the front door. The warmth of the foyer hit her like a wall, cedar and beeswax, and the faint, clean smell of the Pacific that always seemed to settle into stone houses on the North Shore. Her stomach turned once, the way it had been doing with warm, enclosed spaces for months. She swallowed it back. "I need 5 minutes with him, alone." Felix was still standing in the open doorway behind her. "He's not. The last 7 months, Arden. You don't understand what he's been." "Felix." She turned around to look at him. "I know, I'll explain everything, but I need to see him first." He let her go. She knew the way. Gideon Sayre had not had a good morning. He'd been awake since 4, which was standard. The Pacific Rim shipping contacts operated on Tokyo time and Seoul time and Hong Kong time, and if you ran a syndicate that moved product through the port of Vancouver, you learned to keep odd hours or you learned to lose money. He'd taken 3 calls, reviewed 2 sets of manifests, and was now sitting behind the mahogany desk that had belonged to his father and his father's father, staring at a discrepancy in Kroll's accounting that he hadn't been able to explain for 2 weeks. His lawyer, a thin man named Greer, sat in the leather chair across from the desk, attempting to walk him through the tax implications of restructuring one of the Port Moody shell companies. Sayre wasn't listening. The numbers on the page in front of him didn't add up and hadn't added up since the previous quarter. And the more he looked at them, the more he felt the low, cold certainty that something had gone wrong somewhere he hadn't yet identified. Mr. Sayre. Greer cleared his throat. The restructuring would need to be completed before fiscal year end. I heard you. Yes, sir, if you could sign off on page 4. The door opened. I said no interruptions. He didn't look up. He picked up his pen. Whatever it is, tell Felix. Felix is still standing in the foyer, looking like he's seen a ghost. The pen stopped. The voice landed in the center of his chest, like something thrown hard from a great distance. Sayre's hand did not move. He sat very still for a moment that lasted considerably longer than the clock suggested, and then he looked up. Arden Leith stood in the doorway of his study. Her dark hair was damp and pulled back loosely. There were shadows beneath her eyes. He didn't remember being there before. She looked exhausted and pale and entirely, unflinchingly steady in the way she had always been steady, even when everything around her was coming apart. She was watching him with the flat, careful expression she used when she was waiting to see which way a situation would fall. And she was enormously, undeniably, 7 months pregnant. Sayre's pen slipped out of his hand. It hit the surface of the desk, rolled to the edge, and fell onto the floor. Neither of them looked at it. Greer turned around in his chair, opened his mouth to address the interruption, saw what Sayre was looking at, and developed a sudden, intense interest in the grain of the hardwood floor. Greer, Sayre said. His voice sounded strange to him, distant, like he was hearing it through water. Get out! Greer got out. He went quickly, edging around Arden with his briefcase clutched to his chest, and the sound of his footsteps accelerated considerably once he hit the hallway. Arden stepped fully into the study and pulled the heavy door shut behind her. The room was very quiet. The rain hit the floor-to-ceiling windows in sheets. A standing clock ticked in the corner. Sayre stood up. He didn't decide to. His body simply rose and came around the desk, stopping when there were roughly 3 feet between them. He needed to do the math. He had been doing the math since the second she appeared in the doorway. 7 months since she'd left. 7 months and... His chest was very tight. He couldn't look away from her stomach. He couldn't look at her face. He couldn't manage both at once and remain functional. Whose, he said. The word came out stripped bare. Arden blinked. A flash of something crossed her face. Not offense, exactly, but close to it. The expression of someone who has calculated that they will be asked a foolish question and has already decided not to pretend it isn't foolish. Really, Sayre, her voice was dry. You're going to make me do the arithmetic out loud. He flinched. The confirmation hit the back of his sternum and stayed there. The child was his. He took 1 step forward, then another. She held her ground, chin tilting up slightly. She had always held her ground, even in rooms full of men who outweighed her by 40 kilos. He stopped when he was close enough to see the tiredness in her eyes, the faint chapping of her lower lip from the cold, the smudge of ink on her right index finger that told him she'd been working numbers on paper somewhere. You took my child, he said, very controlled. I protected my child, she said. There's a distinction. 7 months, Arden. I know exactly how long I was gone, Sayre. He reached out. He did it slowly, watching her face, and she didn't stop him. He placed both hands on either side of her stomach and immediately felt a sharp, decisive kick against his left palm, the kind of kick that said, "I have opinions about this situation, and I intend to make them known." Sayre stopped breathing. Arden watched him. She watched the muscles in his jaw work. She watched the color drain from his face and come back as something else entirely. She had run the numbers on this moment many times in the Strathcona flat, worked out every probable reaction, accounted for rage and possessiveness and grief. She had not fully accounted for the way his hands would shake. "You need to let go of me," she said quietly, "and you need to sit down and listen to what I'm about to tell you. Because I didn't come back just to show you this. I came back because I found proof." She reached into the bag over her shoulder and pulled out a small USB drive. She held it out between two fingers. He looked at it without releasing her. "Proof of what?" he said. "That Kroll has been skimming from the Port Moody accounts for 14 months, that he generated a kill order 7 months ago using a cloned version of your encryption signature, that the order was flagged to 2 of his own people, not yours, and that he intended it to look like you had signed it, so that when I disappeared, you would spend your energy looking for who took me instead of looking at his books." The silence stretched. "I saw my name on that order," Arden said. Her voice didn't waver. She had practiced not letting it waver. "I thought you'd decided I knew too much. I ran. I was wrong about you. I was not wrong about Kroll." Sayre looked at her for a long time. She could see him recalibrating, running the evidence, reordering the timeline, arriving at the same cold conclusion she had reached 3 weeks ago in a Strathcona flat with a laptop and a mug of cooling tea. He was a man who operated on logic and ledgers, and the precise calculation of who owed whom. It was why she had been good at working for him. She understood those terms. He took the USB drive from her hand. He pulled out his phone, dialed. When the line picked up, he said, with the particular controlled quiet that she had learned long ago was the most dangerous register his voice could reach. "Find Kroll. Don't tell him why. Bring him to the Boundary Road warehouse and wait for me." He hung up. He looked at her. "Sit down," he said. "I'm fine standing." "Arden," he pulled the leather chair from against the wall and placed it in front of her. "Please." She sat. Her lower back thanked her immediately. He made a second call. She heard Dr. Radcliffe's name, heard the words prenatal. Tonight, the North Shore property delivered in a tone that made clear these were instructions and not requests. Then he came back and crouched down in front of her, bringing himself to eye level in a way she had never once seen him do with anyone. "Tell me everything," he said, "from the beginning." She told him. She told him about the 4 days between the pregnancy test and the kill order, about the choice she had made in the parking garage of the Thurlow Street office building, with a copy of the order on her phone and a packed bag in the boot of her car. She told him about the Strathcona flat and the audit work, the months of cross-referencing shell company records against publicly available Port Authority filings, building the case one entry at a time with no access to the Syndicate's internal systems. She told him about the moment the last piece locked into place 3 weeks ago. She told him she had been sick with it, not fear, but the specific nauseating weight of understanding that she had made an enormous, irreversible mistake. "I owe you an apology," she said when she'd finished. "You owe me nothing." His voice was rougher than she expected. "You made the only rational choice available with the information you had. I should have come to you directly. You thought I'd signed your death warrant. Coming to me directly would have been irrational." He paused. "I would have done the same thing." Something loosened in her chest that had been pulled tight for 7 months. Dr. Radcliffe arrived 40 minutes later, a compact, precise man in his 60s who set up the portable ultrasound with the brisk efficiency of someone who had worked in much less comfortable circumstances. Agnes, the housekeeper, materialized from somewhere in the depths of the estate with rooibos tea and heavily buttered toast that Arden ate in 4 bites without embarrassment. She was always hungry. She had been always hungry for months, and chronic anxiety about her grocery budget had conditioned her to ignore it, but she was done ignoring things. The gel was cold, the room was warm. Sayre stood just behind the doctor's shoulder, hands at his sides. The screen resolved from static into a curve of spine, a small rib cage, a fist furled tight. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Strong, regular, a sound like a small determined engine running perfectly in the dark. Sayre sat down heavily in the chair beside the couch. He did not look away from the screen. Arden watched him watch it, and something she had been steeling herself against for 7 months rose quietly in her chest and broke open. 32 weeks, Radcliffe said. Futile measurements within normal range. Heart rate strong, 148 beats per minute. The mother is malnourished and her iron is low, but the baby is compensating well. He shifted the transducer slightly. Do you want to know the sex? Arden shook her head. She had told herself she didn't want to know because she hadn't wanted to picture the future too clearly. Standing in the Strathcona flat with the audit spreadsheets open at midnight, a specific small person with a name and a sex had been too much weight to carry alone. Leave it, Sayre said quietly. When the doctor was gone and the room had settled back into silence, Sayre was still sitting, elbows on knees, hands clasped, looking at the floor. Don't, Arden said. He looked up. Don't apologize. Don't swear vengeance. Don't tell me what you're going to do to Kroll. She stopped. She was more tired than she had words for. I just need somewhere to sleep tonight. We can negotiate the rest in the morning. You're not negotiating anything, he said. He stood. You're staying. That's not how negotiations work. Arden. He crossed the room and stopped in front of her. The controlled surface cracked just at the edges, showing something underneath that was not controlled at all. You have been eating tinned soup in the East End for 7 months. You are 32 weeks pregnant with my child. You are staying in this house tonight and every night after, and if you want to argue terms, we can argue terms, but we do it from here. She looked at him. He looked at her. I'm not staying somewhere I have no say, she said. You have every say. Sayre. Please. He said it like a man who doesn't use the word often and means it completely when he does. 1 week, she said. We assess after 1 week. Done. Agnes showed her to a room that smelled of cedar and clean linen, with a mattress that was the most substantial thing Arden had slept on in 7 months. She was asleep before she'd fully decided whether to feel grateful about it. She woke at 2 in the morning to the familiar complaint of her bladder, and a craving for milk so specific it felt like a directive from somewhere she couldn't argue with. The house was quiet. She pulled on the heavy cotton robe Agnes had left on the chair and made her way down the back staircase. She was halfway along the hall when she heard voices from the direction of the study. She stood still. Felix's voice clipped and low. One other she didn't recognize, and Sayre. She could identify him by register alone, using the particular flat cadence he reserved for instructions that he expected followed without commentary. Kroll made contact with 2 of his people in the Tri-Cities before we picked him up, Felix was saying. They know something's wrong. How many? We think 3, maybe 4. Find them tonight. I want this resolved before morning. A pause. Pull the perimeter team from the east side rotation. Full detail on the house. That's going to send a signal. I don't care what signal it sends. She's here. The baby's here. Nothing moves until I say so. Arden stepped out of the hallway. Felix saw her first. His hand moved on reflex before he recognized her. He'd learned better than to reach for the weapon, but the instinct still fired. He exhaled through his nose and looked briefly at the ceiling, which was as close to composure as Felix managed at 2 in the morning. Sayre turned. The operational mask went somewhere else immediately. You should be in bed, he said, crossing toward her. I'm hungry. She looked past him at Felix. Stand down. I'm not here to audit the threat assessment. She looked back at Sayre. Kroll's people are already mobilizing. It's handled. How many does he actually have? Sayre paused. Enough that I'd like you to stay on this floor tonight. I want the actual number. Arden. I spent 7 months building an evidence case against your head accountant from a one-bedroom flat on a second-hand laptop, she said. I am not a person who needs to be managed. Tell me the number. Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, he told her. She did a quick calculation. Then you need at least 6 on the north perimeter, not 4. Kroll knows this property. He's been here for the annual financial reviews. He knows the south approach is the one you'll weight heavily because it's the obvious choice. He'll come from the north. Felix and Sayre exchanged a look. North perimeter, Sayre said. Felix left. Sayre walked her to the kitchen and poured her a glass of whole milk without being asked. She drank it at the island and accepted the second glass without argument. He stood across from her, watching her the way he watched things he considered his responsibility. You're going to tell me to go back to bed, she said. I'm going to tell you that you were right about the perimeter. She set down the glass. The kitchen was warm and quiet, and the Pacific rain had eased to something closer to mist against the windows. She was tired enough that the edges of things felt slightly soft. I was right about something else too, she said. She wasn't sure why she was saying it at 2 in the morning in a kitchen that smelled faintly of the dinner she'd missed. I was right that I needed to be the one to bring you the drive. Not because I couldn't have posted it anonymously. I could have, but I needed to see your face when you looked at it. Why? Because I needed to know whether I'd been wrong about you. She met his eyes. I had to come back and see for myself whether what I thought I knew was real. Whether 7 months of hiding had made me cynical about everything, or whether you were actually the man I believed you were before Kroll's order showed up with your name on it. Sayre was quiet. The rain found the kitchen window again, irregular and gentle. And, he said. The pen, she said. He looked at her. You dropped your pen, she said. That was the answer. Not the call to have Kroll picked up, not the security detail. You dropped your pen and you put your hands on my stomach without asking, and you looked like someone had pulled a support beam out from under the whole structure. She shrugged carefully, avoiding her lower back. That was the answer I needed. He came around the island. He was a deliberate man, calculated, precise, and he moved with that same deliberateness now, stopping in front of her, reading her face the way he read figures, looking for the place where what was stated and what was true were the same thing. Then he kissed her. It wasn't careful. It was 7 months of silence compressed into something urgent and a little desperate, and she kissed him back with the specific relief of someone who has been holding their breath for a very long time and has finally remembered how to exhale. 3 days later, the north perimeter held for exactly 40 minutes. Arden was in the sitting room when the first concussion hit. She felt it through the floor before she heard it, a low vibration that rattled the clock on the mantelpiece and sent a picture crooked on the wall. Then the sound reached her, a deep percussive boom that shook the windows in their frames. Felix was in the doorway before the echo died. Move, he said. He didn't run. Too smart for that, it spread panic. But he moved with a speed that made argument impossible, and Arden moved with him because she had run the probability calculations in the Strathcona flat for months, and she understood exactly what a hostile approach on a property like this meant for someone in her position. The second impact hit the east wing. Plaster dust filtered from the ceiling. Below, glass broke. The panic room was behind the wine cellar, Sayre's father's design, which said something about the previous generation's priorities, but also meant it was stone and steel and 12 centimeters of reinforced concrete on every wall. Felix had the biometric door open in 4 seconds. He checked the interior, rations, a radio, the armory wall she had always found grimly excessive, and turned back to her. In, he said. Felix. He's already on his way back in, Arden. She went in. A contraction hit her as she crossed the threshold, not the practice ones she'd had for 3 weeks, but something lower, tighter, definitive in a way that turned her stomach over. Not now, she thought, not yet. Lock it from the inside, Felix said. Manual override left panel. Don't open it until you hear his voice. The door swung shut. The sound of the attack disappeared, replaced by the hum of ventilation and the close fluorescent quiet of the bunker. She sat against the wall with her knees drawn up as far as they would go. She pressed the heel of her hand into her lower back. The contraction eased. Then it came back. She was on her hands and knees on the cold concrete 40 minutes later when the pounding started on the vault door. 3 hard strikes, a pause, 2 more. The pattern they'd established the morning after she arrived because she had insisted on establishing one. She crawled to the control panel. The manual override lever was cold against her palm. She pulled it. The door opened inward. Sayre came through it and dropped to his knees on the concrete beside her in one motion. He was in dark tactical gear she'd never seen him wear before. There was blood on his hands and a cut above his left eyebrow that hadn't been seen to. He looked at her face and understood immediately. "How far apart?" he said. 5 minutes, maybe less now. He looked around the room with the speed she recognized as the operational part of his brain taking full command. Radcliffe was 20 minutes out at minimum. She could see him do the calculation. "All right," he said. He didn't say anything else. He shed his jacket, rolled his sleeves, and helped her to the cot against the far wall with a steadiness that she gripped because her own had departed around the 3rd contraction. "Sayre," she said. "I'm right here. You've never done this." "I've done things with considerably worse odds." He positioned himself, met her eyes. "Look at me, only at me." She found his face in the flat, fluorescent light. His eyes were the same dark grey they had always been, steady in a way that had nothing to do with coldness and everything to do with the specific quality of attention he paid to things that mattered to him. The same look he'd had when she'd explained Kroll's audit trail. The same look he'd had when he'd first placed his hands on her stomach and felt the baby move. He talked her through it. He was not a gentleman in most respects, but he was a precise one, and precision was what the moment required. She screamed his name twice and apologized for neither. He didn't tell her it was fine. He told her she was doing it. The baby arrived at 3:47 in the morning, in a bunker beneath a stone house in the British properties, in a city where it was raining again, because in Vancouver it was always raining again. A girl. She announced herself immediately, furiously, with the specific indignation of someone evicted from comfortable premises without adequate notice. Sayre wrapped her in his jacket and laid her on Arden's chest with hands that were not entirely steady. He sat on the edge of the cot. He rested his forehead against Arden's hair. His hand covered his daughter, feeling the small specific weight of her, the improbable reality of her existing in this of all places. "Radcliffe is 2 minutes out," Felix said from the doorway, and Arden heard in his voice the precise shade of relief that told her he had been standing outside the vault door for the last 40 minutes. "Kroll?" she asked. "Handled," Sayre said. "All of them. All of them." She looked down at the small face against her chest. Her daughter's eyes were squeezed shut, her fists furled tight, her whole self concentrated on the enormous project of being newly and loudly alive. Arden pressed her lips to the damp, dark cap of her hair. For 7 months she had not let herself picture this, not the face, not the name, not the specific weight of her in her arms, because she hadn't been able to afford it. She let herself picture it now. She let herself have it. "She needs a name," Sayre said. His voice was very quiet. "I know. We have time." "Yes." Arden looked up at him. In the flat light of the bunker, he looked exactly like what he was. Tired, bloodied, marked by a life she had always known, was the price of admission to this particular world. He also looked like a man who had just done the hardest and most important thing of his life and intended to keep doing it. "We have time." Radcliffe arrived and checked them both with the thoroughness of someone who understood the room, held his employer's most important concern. Agnes appeared in the subsequent hour with warm blankets and clean clothes. and the calm efficiency of a woman who had seen the estate through worse and had firm opinions about recovery nutrition. The house above them was a wreck. 3 windows gone in the east wing, scorch marks along the north wall, months of work for the grounds crew. Arden sat in the master suite in the grey morning light that came clean off the Pacific through the rain. Her daughter asleep on her chest, Sayre in the chair beside the bed, watching them both with the fixed attention of a man who has learned not to take the presence of something for granted. "I want a full security review," Arden said. "Complete accounting of how they breached the north approach. I want to see the gap analysis." "I know you do. And I want access to Kroll's complete books. I started the audit from the outside. I want to finish it from the inside." "That can be arranged." "And Sayre," she looked at him steadily, "if you ever lock me in a room without telling me the actual threat level, I will take myself and this child back to Strathcona and build a better case than anything Kroll ever managed. Are we clear?" He was quiet for a moment. "We're clear." "Good." She settled her daughter more firmly against her chest. The baby stirred, made a small sound of protest at being shifted, and went back to sleep with the decisive efficiency of someone who has already decided what her priorities are. "Then we can work out the rest from here." Outside, the rain came in off the strait in long silver sheets, and the mountains above West Vancouver disappeared into the low grey ceiling of the November sky, and somewhere in the city below the Syndicate turned over its ledgers and waited to see what the new numbers would look like. Arden already knew what they would show.